Looking at my drip, looking at your drip. Whoa.
What's up guys, it's Jazz and there's a glare in my glasses, but we're just gonna have to deal with it because I'm blind. Today's video is going to be about college note-taking tips. This is going to be a 3-part series. So this video is going to be note-taking, and then I'm going to do study tips, and then I'm going to be doing test-taking tips. So stay tuned. But like I said, on my community tab, I only upload each video after I hit 100 views. So once this video hits 100 views, I will unlock the next video, and so on and so forth. But I'm going to try to have 2 videos scheduled per week. That way, if you don't unlock the next video, you'll still get at least 1 video to watch for the week. Alright, so tip number 1 is something that I wish I knew about for like my entire college experience, but for some reason I find out the last semester, called PDF Driver, and it's basically where you can look up books, and a lot of times you'll find your textbook for your class for free. So look that up for your textbooks and stuff for like the next few semesters to come. Okay? Alright, so now the first real tip for taking notes is to read what you're taking notes on. And it sounds self-explanatory, but it just makes sense to actually read what you're taking notes on so you can understand what you're writing down. You don't want to just mindlessly copy down random sentences that look important. Read it and understand it, or read it and don't understand it. That way you can write that you don't understand it so that you know what you should ask your teacher when it comes down, when it's time for the lecture. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to read your textbook, but whatever it is that you use to take your notes on, read it, okay? And I recommend you read before class and highlight information just so that you can kind of get a background of what your teacher is going to be talking about. Treat your lecture as kind of like a review session for you to clarify anything, or just for you to solidify and relearn the information rather than it just being like a first time experience. Another tip when it comes to reading is to color code, and this is going to translate to your notes, I promise. If you purchase like an online PDF, or if you actually bought your textbook and you don't want to sell it back, I recommend highlighting just the relevant sentences, and I recommend you color code what you highlight. So for example, I do a 3 color system where I highlight summarizing details, definitions, and examples. And I will go ahead and show you an example of that right now. So for green is definitions, and then pink is my summarizing details, and yellow is my examples. And basically that just helps me. That way I'll read through it, highlight as I read, and then I'll write my notes based on what I highlight. And then the beauty of reading before class is when they post the PowerPoint or when they're lecturing, you can kind of see what topics they skip over. So if they skip over a topic that you like highlighted or took notes on, you can just either lightly cross out that highlight or just delete it from your notes and move forward, and you don't have to worry about that when it comes time to studying. Now, I know a lot of us don't like purchase our books. Some of us rent the books, and we bought the book but we want to sell it back because we ended up not needing it. So you can't really write in the book, or else they're not going to take it. If you really want to be hands-on, I recommend buying highlighter tape. It's kind of like whiteout tape. This is whiteout tape, but they have highlight tape that comes in the same dispenser, and you would just move it over the words that you want to highlight and make sure it's removable. That way when you're done with the book, you can just go back through your book and just remove all the highlighting tape. Or I recommend just going ahead and getting electronic copies of your book. Okay, so tip number 2, I guess, yeah, tip number 2. Well, maybe this is like tip number 2/3, maybe? Yeah. Oh no, because reading and highlighting, those go together, but at the same time, they could be 2 separate. The next tip is to find a style that you like the most. So that could be digital, that could be handwriting, that could be mind mapping. There's a ton of YouTube videos on how people like to take their notes. I personally like to type my notes because I hate my handwriting. I can write neatly, but it takes me forever to write when I write neatly. Okay, my next tip for you is to stop trying to be perfect. Can we talk about how a lot of these study channels have the most beautiful handwriting you've ever seen? Like, their handwriting is literally so neat and so pretty that it looks like a font. I literally used to obsess over having notes that looked pretty. Like, I wanted notes that I could post on Instagram and be proud of, but that takes entirely too much time and it's just not realistic for me. So I say this to you: stop trying to be perfect with your notes. You will waste time, and when you have a lot of reading to do, the last thing you want to do is waste time trying to make your notes look pretty. I'm not saying it's bad to have pretty notes, but use your time wisely. If you're like me and you really want something that looks neat, I recommend typing. And if you want something that looks like handwriting, I recommend this website called defont.com. They have a section where you can look up handwriting type fonts that literally look like somebody's handwriting, and then you would just download it to your computer and then you could type with that font. So even though you're typing, it looks like handwriting, so it looks really neat and cute. My next tip is probably gonna rub some people the wrong way, but you gotta hear me out first, okay? Stop rewriting your notes. Stop it. Just stop rewriting your notes. I'm not saying that it's not a good way to learn, because it has been proving that rewriting notes is a good way to solidify memory, but time, like, do you have time for that? For every single class that you take notes in, do you have time to rewrite your notes just to learn it? Try to find a different way to solidify what you wrote down. One, make sure you wrote down good information the first time around. That way you don't have to go back and change anything or take anything out. And then try to find different memory skills that work for you. Whether it be you make a game out of it on like Quizlet, or you have somebody quiz you. Try to find different ways to memorize the stuff that you take notes on. I promise you, rewriting, even though it may help you, it might hurt you also in the long run. Like, you might tire yourself out, and we don't want to burn out. Burnout is a real thing. Don't. Just save yourself, please. Okay, my next tip is to either write or type in columns. I found that when I take notes, sometimes my words don't go across the entire page before I go to the next line. So writing in columns just helps me save paper and save space. For example, here's my notes right here. It kind of makes everything look a little bit more neat. It makes you look like you wrote more than what you actually did sometimes. It's only a page, but if I were to make it one column, it would end up being 2 pages, which is unnecessary. So yeah. What I like to do is I like to go to more columns and then hit 2, and then I just like to check line between, just so that it looks more sorted and organized. Alright, so the next tip is to, okay, this is for when you're not really sure what's important to highlight or not. I recommend that you look for things like superlatives. Superlatives are the words that say like best, worst, least, most, things that kind of make something stand out from other things. Look for things about important people. Look for defining numbers, and by defining numbers I mean something like in chemistry, the number of protons an element has is like the defining aspect of that element. So like things that characterize something. Like, my last tip is math related. So if you want to figure out how to solve a problem, instead of just writing out examples of problems, write out an example and then write out steps on how you solve the problem. Like, literally verbally write out what you do at each step of solving the problem. Sometimes if you just look at a problem and you see that it's solved and you see what the answer is, you don't really look at it and see, okay, I did this and then I did this and then I did this. A lot of times math kind of just looks whole when there's, and then you don't really see the details. So just try to break it down further. If all else fails, if you're stuck with like the numbers, at least you know what step you were supposed to do, you know? There are some teachers that even if you get the wrong answer, if you did the right steps, you get partial credit. So definitely know how to solve the problems. Good? Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to get this video to 100 views so that we can unlock the next part to this series. And I will see you guys in my next video.